Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you again for joining us and participating in the workshop on how AI can be transformed as a public good, and when do we really start saying that when does the AI being used in the public good can be considered as a public good. So this is what we'll be doing. That in this session, we'll be analyzing the interplay of private investment, public infrastructure, and public accountability. To like as we're seeing that across the globe, that there's a rush to build national AI strategies and action framework, and there is an interest in applying AI in public delivery systems. And this urgency, as per our understanding, is coming from two places. One, that AI digital world always attracts a lot more private investment because of the large scale process projects that require. And secondly, it also gives governments the chance to rebrand public sector as efficient by involving technology in it. And that has been something that is a very old method of governments trying to make public sector more efficient and trying to change the rebranding of the image of the public sector. In this session, we'll be using a common analytical framework to examine how different Asian governments approach AI policy. To build a framework, we went through policies and action frameworks by India, Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And then we found few common planning themes, and there were two recurring patterns. Was that there are governments are emphasizing AI for public good and using of AI in public delivery system, but there is often very little or no clarity on how does the policy intend translate into implementation. We do not see a practical examples about the frameworks that have been designed either by the UN or by the Indian government or by non-profit organizations across the globe. How they're going to be translating into in implementation, that's always really missing. And this session is something that where we want to concentrate on how can we really move from just having hypothetical conversations about what ethical AI looks like to actually implementing and also seeing that what are the issues that will be there to implement. uh, as part of like a for participation, what we would really love for you to share your thoughts on the Mentimeter. I'll share the link and the code in the chat, and this is where please do definitely share your thoughts about how on the different frameworks that we have, on the questions that we have. That would be really helpful because while we are taking notes, we just want to ensure that no point is missed. And I'm so sorry, I do speak like a little fast. So at any point in time, if you think that I am just speaking too fast, please let me know. It's a force of habit. We'll start with the first question. Would you like to take it ahead, Suruchi? You share the screen.
Megha, I think there's a request to put the.
I'm doing that. The Mentimeter, right? Yeah. Suruchi, are you sharing the screen for the questions? You're on mute.
Yeah, I'll share, Megha. 1 minute. Yeah. Can you people see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Suruchi. I'm researcher at Digital Empowerment Foundation. So like Megha gave the introduction, how we collectively came as a bunch of researchers to understand the very fundamental question, is AI public good? And if it is, at what stage it is public good? And what are the challenges which comes mostly from the two dominant sector, which is like private, when there's a lot of private investment in a public service delivery, what happens to public accountability? So we all know how across the world technology is such a thing where private sectors play a very important role. So while we are talking about AI as a public good, it becomes very important to understand what percentage, what role does private investment have and private sector play in building of AI. or when we talk about is AI public good or not. So the first question which we want to, as part of the workshop, we want to critically engage with all our participants here is to understand, for example, if we take a country like India, where we say that is AI a public good, it becomes very important to understand from the two perspective. The first perspective is the budget perspective. Most of the government of the every country will set up a budget around which, okay, this much the state government or the central government is going to invest for AI development. And then of course there is like the very important, very critical, which is a public private partnership, which is very much a dominant mode of investment for AI good. So our prompt for the group is, how do we understand what is the ratio between public and private investment in advancing AI for public good in your country? So, for example, if we have our colleagues who are from Indonesia, who are from Malaysia or Nepal or different South Asian countries, what is the ratio? Is the government investing 80%, or is like the PPP could be also like varies, no? Like it could be 50-50, it could be 51-49. So we'd like to understand from each country what is the ratio of public and private investment, because the budget is a very critical point to understand while we look into the different user value is a different thing, but from the when the products are being made, it becomes very important to understand this. So Megha, are we having this, have you shared the Mentimeter link?
Yes. It's the first question.
Yeah.
When if, could you also, I saw that somebody has shared 2080. Can you also please mention your country? That will help us keep tabs. And please, we would request you to unmute yourself and share your thoughts on the question. And you can also share your thoughts in the chat.
If I want to give more heads up, how do I see from country like India? So in India, there is AI mission. So there is always like when you have a mission oriented policies, then you allocate a budget to that sector, and then that will be used by different parts of the different sectors of the government to be fulfilled for develop to support investment in AI. So we want to understand if this is in India, it's like a mission oriented, which they allocate a specific budget for supporting AI tools development for national for investment in education, health. So we also want to understand what's happening in different countries, what's happening in Nepal, what's happening in Indonesia. For example, in Indonesia, they have like AI strategy. So from this examples, we like to understand more. Anybody can just unmute themselves and can tell what do they think about the budgetary perspective of AI as public good, or is it not important? Is it not a very important question to look while we're looking AI as a public good?
Just adding to what Suruchi mentioned, that in India, government has pledged $1.12 billion in building AI ecosystem, where they will be spending a lot of money on building data centers as well as colleges and courses that will bring in the workforce. So is it something similar that you see in your country? Reason being, it's just a very important part, because that would also mean that our countries and governments across the globe pushing the money from important services like healthcare as hospitals to building the data infrastructure for it, or like the AI part of it. So that becomes extremely important. As Nirosha, would you like to unmute yourself and share your thoughts from Sri Lanka?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nirosha. In Sri Lanka also, now from the previous governments, new governments, they are considering about the artificial intelligence, how to move towards with the new era in the AI era. So basically, the government in the initiation of AI policy, they have more concern about the artificial intelligence, and now they are more concerned about how the government can be considered on the AI, and also they are the government is invest on the AI implementations. It is a good thing, though we have different political changes, but our country focus more on the AI implementation and the investment on AI. And very recently we had a huge investment on having conferences about the AI conference, and also they were discussed about like the exhibition also. For the first time, we have already implemented AI exhibition in Sri Lanka. So I think it's a good, in the country like Sri Lanka, it's a good initiation. Thank you.
So we have Aris, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
So we have Aris who's talking about how Philippines is also investing until 2028 in AI in different sectors. But Aris, would you like to discuss more about what sectors they are planning to invest mostly in, and what percentage of, if you have an idea, what percentage of private investment is there? Because it becomes very important. Like I talked about, the PPP model is very important in technological advancement and technological development. So how do you see their AI as a public good?
Hi, Suruchi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
okay. Well, I have a very brief idea of what the Philippines will be doing until 2028. No? So given the number that I gave you, we are slowly going back into PPP sessions, no? Primarily because the previous administration, sorry for the statement, no? It got somewhat distorted, no? And they actually devoted themselves to only partnering with one specific country, no? But now I think we've opened up again our economy to multi countries at this point, and we're also accommodating more investments, no, coming from the private industries. Hence, I cannot really provide an indicative rate of what PPP will, if PPP will be used heavily into this. But the commitment is coming from government. We have what you call the Department of Science and Technology, and it is actually them who's actually earmarked the said amount, no, in partnership, of course, with the budgeters of government, no. I heard that the investments will be devoted unto healthcare, they'll go into education, mobility, and environment. No? These are the primary areas of investments that we will get into. And I think they're also looking into heavily investing into local startups, no, of course R&D, capacity building, and the likes, no. So so far that is basically what we have as far as AI investments. I believe it's a pretty small amount relative to the other Southeast Asian countries and Asia Pacific countries. But I'm giving this administration and our government a chance to do better next cycle, no? So again, I hope you guys understand we're recovering from a very dark history of quote unquote, no, a government that is not, that has been very divisive, no, in terms of how we were managed. And it's only now that we are recovering again. Of course, on top of that, we suffered heavily over the pandemic, no. I think you guys know we are the only country with face masks, face shields, no, used, no, for some reason. And we were depleted, we borrowed heavily, and hence, plus the fact that we have suffered heavily on learning loss in the Philippines. So I'd like to believe that this amount of commitment will hopefully push us to do better next cycle.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aris, for sharing the Philippines story in brief. So if anyone more want to talk about this budgetary part and the government investment in AI is something, yeah, Dhirinder, you can
Okay.
unmute and talk. Yes.
Hi everyone. I'm from Nepal. So in context of Nepal, Nepal currently has a national AI policy. So we don't have any budgeting plan for AI. So Nepal just released its first policy. And in terms of public goods, how Nepal is using AI in governmental sector, it is not, because Nepal just had its first national AI policies to regulate AI. And talking about budget for AI, so we have a national AI centers, and that is working with the private sectors to enable AI in their use. So currently Nepal is just developing, and we are still in the developing phase for AI as well. So currently there is no involvement of AI in governmental sector, but in 2 or 3 years might be Nepal can include AI in their governmental sector as well. But in private sector, we are using, people are collaborating with private sector most of the time to include AI in their daily use. So from government, we are not totally into AI, but as of private sector, there are many changes and advancement in AI. So that was it.
Thank you, Dhirinder. So I think we can move to the next question, which is regarding, is my screen visible?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. 1 minute.
So we have your Mentimeter up.
Yeah. So the next question is regarding, like we talked about how the first comes is like the budgetary part, which is like a huge part. But the second thing is which comes in form of data ownership and governance. So while AI is being used in public service delivery or public good, so the question emerges about who is going to own it and this raises a very important question about accountability. So when there are grievances, when there are misuses, when there are malpractices, and mostly like I talked about, in most of the countries AI is being developed into PPP model. So what happens to data ownership and what happens to governance? So for example, we have two examples which we would like to share with you before I open the room for discussion. So for example, like the smart city infrastructure. So we went through the different South Asian countries and we saw that most of the countries are investing in AI for smart city development. So since the smart city infrastructure rely on public-private partnership for both funding and operation, who should own or control the vast amount of data collected from things like city sensors and connected devices? So this becomes like a very critical critical data ownership is very important for when we want to conceptualize or whether we want to think whether it's a public good or not. And if I want to give another example from healthcare sector, because most of the countries are investing in healthcare sector, we see that AI companies are partnering with government bodies to develop programs and apps for disease diagnostics. So if you could remember the very famous case of Google in UK, Google was developing a diagnostic for kidney disease. Then there was a lot of talk and discussion about, the misuse of data when data was not collected from people with like proper consent. Then the whole debate emerged, who should the citizen go for when it comes to accountability? So it's like in the PPP model, it becomes very important. A question arises: who is going to be accountable? Then, yeah. So these are two of the questions. With two of the examples, one from the smart city and another from the health, we want to discuss who and what form of data ownership and governance will emerge while we talk about, developing AI as public good. Megha, do you want to add something to this? Varun, do you want to add something here to the?
No, I'll just give an example of data ownership in India. So in India, sanitation workers in smart cities have to wear RFID tags. So the RFID tags were introduced to increase efficiency of sanitation workers, but they along with it to track their incoming and outgoing. So if you will see that data is owned by the private organization who are not based out of the country, who are a third party organization based out somewhere else, like globally. So it's based somewhere else. Suruchi, your screen is visible. Yeah. So that becomes a very important part, that now here the grievance of sanitation workers are that the RFID collect, because it collects the data in terms of the movement, it also has a camera, so it records, and it also records their voices, and they have to take it back home, so it records the entire conversation, their photographs, and also the tracking. So that becomes so that brings out a lot of stress on women, especially because they're scared to now use washrooms, and it becomes a very important part in terms of right to privacy, that we have taken away the right to privacy of the sanitation workers. So in that lens, how do you see this playing out in your country? If anybody would like to share, and in Indonesia and Malaysia, to my understanding, as per the law, is that the health records are owned by the hospital and not by the person. So, how do you think that in this space it will be difficult for people, and who should be accountable, like in government? At what level, which kind of person should be accountable for it? Because we won't be able to hold private organizations accountable. Uh, If not, would you like to, should we move to a next question? Yeah. Varun, would you like to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Megha. Thank you, Suruchi. I'll just share my screen first. Is the screen visible?
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, maybe this is a question that should ideally come before we go into the implementation of AI for public good and, the budgetary allocation for it, which a lot of governments and policy statements that we have noticed often ignore, which is what is the purpose and value of bringing in AI here. Now, as a result of AI being most popular technology that everyone is talking about and the hype surrounding it, I feel like that what we've noticed is that governments have also felt this need to push AI into urban systems, healthcare, financial systems. And when we went through some of the strategy, mission, policy documents of the four countries that we had mentioned, there were multiple references to, yes, we need to have AI in this function, we need to have AI in this particular function. So we saw this previously in case of digitization of records, which in a lot of ways was a precursor to AI, where suddenly a lot of systems and mechanisms, be it for public service delivery, be it for urban governance, healthcare, and financial systems, first they became digital without a clear justification of what is this digitization trying to solve and why do we need it? What is the cost benefit analysis? And based on all of this analysis, it would have ideally led into a question of, okay, who is this trained toward? How much of it is public? So to think of some examples when we think of, say, urban mobility, like a more not appropriate really, but a wider catch would have been to think of AI, say, for better public transport. But we have seen higher uptake of digitization and AI, for example, in deciding what is the fastest route to get from one point to another if you're traveling by your private car. So that sort of public element to it came on some of the popular platforms and services much later. And even when government was looking at it, government should have ideally looked at the public aspects of it and looked at, okay, transport is the good that we are supposed to do as the government, instead of focusing on AI adoption as like a both the objective and the end that we are trying to achieve. And even in case of public service delivery, like in case of employment guarantee schemes or transferring income directly into bank accounts, digitization and AI were seen as things that would naturally lead to better efficiency and optimal delivery without a broad enough discussion on, okay, what are the issues that we are trying to solve in each of these elements and how do we go about discussing that? So based on that and our analysis of the strategy documents in 3 countries, we have outlined these 3 questions. First of it is, what are the public needs or challenges that we are actually trying to solve with AI into urban systems, healthcare, and financial systems? So from your respective context, if you could reflect on this for a second and think about what is it trying to solve, what should it solve, and what is it actually implemented in. So if you could think about that for a second and give your answers on the Mentimeter. And actually, we can take all questions together if that's okay with everyone. The second question, in continuing from the first one, is beyond the ability to optimize and to predict outcomes, how can it contribute to better? I've said listed fairness, equity, and better outcomes here, but from a public point of view, from the state's point of view, what are the outcomes it should look towards, and how does AI adoption serve that? And the third one is it's a little bit of a leading question, so apologies for that. But is AI adoption in public functions based on hype, efficiency, or in our experience, has it led to clear benefits uh, because the state has adopted AI in a particular area? Would anyone like to step in here on these questions that we've just highlighted? Okay, all right, I'll move to the next question in that case. Yeah, so bias, equity, and corrective frameworks, these are one of the topics that have received a lot of attention both in academia and in civil society organizations, but maybe not so much in government. And some of the common examples of this that I can think of is, if we take of something like hiring, for example, there is an assumption that outcomes that AI systems throw out are likely to be fair and objective in that sense. But what is often missing, like the point that government and sometimes private organizations miss when they adopt it, is that the data that has fed these systems are likely to be not objective and neutral. And because of that, it raises a fundamental question of whether once you feed this data into AI, can it ever be objective and neutral to that extent? Or are we accounting for the fact that these results are likely to be biased? So then what is a corrective framework that we go about trying to address this bias? So to take a very popular example of hiring, for example, now historically there has been a bias in like broadly across the world, I would say, where men have worked in certain jobs more than women. So once you feed this data into a system, the sort of results that it's likely to throw up would prefer a particular gender over another. Now, if we contextualize it within India or localize it further, there are likely to be other biases based on caste, class, etc., that are going to reflect on these, that reflect in the data already, which is likely to reflect in the outcomes that AI throws out. So another more local example coming from India is that in the colonial history of India, there have been certain groups, communities, castes, tribes that have been marked as habitual offenders on the list that police stations have had. Now, there's a lot of research on this that is done by the Criminal Justice and Accountability Project in Madhya Pradesh, where they have looked at how this list is still maintained in some extent by by one of the states in India. And now there is an attempt to digitize the same list. So how that likely to play out is that certain communities that have historically been targeted for crimes are likely to show up in this AI generated output as communities more likely to commit crime. So that is a problem where the original sin has already happened in terms of how the data has been collected, stored, and that bias is implicit in that data at that stage itself. And now we have reached a point where governments are feeding this data into systems, and that is producing results that are biased. To take another example of financial systems, which we have seen is where states have marked out as another area of public functions where there is going to be more AI adoption. If you look at loans for agriculture, setting up businesses, historically, more men have been in this business and have taken more loans. People who have owned land for a longer time have been able to give collateral in return for loans. So now, if you feed this data into a public service that the government is doing to decide who gets subsidy or who gets loans at a lower rate, it is likely to reflect this bias, which will have very real outcomes on the ground simply because we had biased data to begin with and we fed it into a system thinking that it will give more objective, neutral results. But the same old question of what is objectivity, what is neutrality, is that something that we can hope for as an ideal? Is that something that we should hope that we should even consider as an ideal, or are there other corrective frameworks that we should look towards? And what we noticed in these strategies when we looked at them is that they do sometimes make passing references to bias, equity, inclusion. But in terms of concrete frameworks or guardrails that look at these things, those are lacking. I mean, these are just ideals that are propagated in these vision documents, but does not reflect in the frameworks, in procurement norms, etc. So that leaves us with these three questions that we had outlined, which is, as I had said, they often replicate societal and social and spatial biases. And some neighborhoods with that would be from a public safety and urban governance lens, where some are high risk and some are low risk. So how can we think about designing policies and data sets to counter these biases? Or if we understand that, yes, these results are going to be biased, then how do we go about solving that? And the third question is, what kind of data, like if you could come in here from your local context to help us understand more about what is the sort of biasing that has happened in data across historical periods and whether they should be re-examined in the context of AI-driven public services. So if you have some examples that you can share from your own context, that would be really helpful for us.
I feel the examples are pretty limited. No? This is Aries, by the way. Pretty limited on a per country basis. No, but talking of bias, no, and in relation to misinformation, I think you guys caught the news recently, no, of what happened to Deloitte in Australia, no, wherein I think the Australian government used AI to interpret a report, no, and hence it was a penalty, no, granted upon Deloitte, no, for the misuse, no. So in my opinion, that was a pretty clear of a financial institution relying heavily on AI, and unfortunately, there was no vetting, no, in the process, no. So they technically left AI to simply come up with an interpretation of a report, no. In the Philippine setting, again, as I've said earlier, we are still pretty like was mentioned, we do now have a few organizations sprouting. No, I commend the team that is presenting right now. No, because these are questions that we would like to also ask our own communities and our own our own environment. No, and I'm hoping that if you do have reports of this, we can actually, if you guys are willing to share it with us, something that we can also look into. No, and maybe hedge from moving forward. No. Again, the what we feel that one of the heaviest issues that we have right now, and I want to go back to the root of all the questions, no, is practically the crafting of an AI law, no. I think mentioned on thread earlier where I asked, no, if you do have a law specific, no, to this, no, especially in the area of regulation. That is something that we are still trying to deliberate upon up to this point. And I think lawyers in our area are still trying to anchor arguments on Data Privacy Act, no, on the Consumer Act and the Philippines, on e-commerce laws. And I think it has gone astray. I mediate for the Supreme Court, and I've seen cases that we had to abandon and just elevate to the to the judges, no, for simply lack of a footprint to decide on specific cases, no. So biases I think will come, and I think it's a fantastic question on how we could correct the bias, no, over time. I think there's no mechanism at this point for us to be able to cleanse our data, no, of the biases. I do not know what if it's going to be the act of private industries who will do that in partnership with government, who can, knowing for a fact at this point that government is somehow involved also in tainting, information, no. And just like in the case of the pandemic, as I think mentioned earlier, I don't know if you guys are aware, no? We had a mechanism wherein everybody has to go through a QR code for us to be able to, just submit our information, so we can gain entry into a specific infrastructure, no? What happened was, we found out later on that there was no government approval of collection of data, no? It was a private entity who simply volunteered with government that they will collect data on their behalf, but apparently there was no approval of such collection. And what happened was this private entity sold our data to marketing agencies coming from one country, no, that we are in conflict with right now, no. And so we were getting a lot of scams onto our mobile phones, and we were surprised, where is this all coming from, no? Apparently it all came from illegal acts and scammers, no, operating in the Philippines, no. And so I think something came up with the new administration. They had to halt and do a crackdown on the scammers operating in the Philippines. And now I'm happy to just share that scamming has gone like what, less than 90% of total abuse in the past, no. But again, I go back, I think there has to be again a private public initiative to be able to cleanse data of biases. So bias is something that we cannot really read off, no, in our systems. However, it has to be reduced heavily, and for us to be able to again come up with clean and and sterile information moving forward. Yeah, thank you. That's basically my opinion on the matter.
Thanks a lot, Aris. That's a really good point that you made, and we hadn't thought about it, about who should be cleaning the bias, because our understanding was that yes, since it's government data, that is something that should be the government's job. But now that we live in an age where, like you had pointed out, there's a lot of private involvement, say in like this QR code entry to infrastructure. So we have something very similar in India also, where in airports there is a private entity that is there in all the airport gates saying that, okay, we will give you faster entry into the airport if you scan your face and you put that data into the database. And the government had just washed its hands of it, saying that we have nothing to do with it. And now we are seeing that happen in case of immigration also. But in case of immigration, because the government maybe has a higher sense of higher role to play there, they have not explicitly said that it is a private entity. So there's a lot of opacity here on who is actually doing that. And I think even Europe today has announced that they will be implementing this automated AI-based immigration system. So that is something that we will look at more in more seriousness as we go ahead. And thank you so much. We will definitely share our research and a questionnaire with you so that you can collect that information as you had suggested. Thank you so much. Megha, Suruchi, do you want to? Sorry, do we have any more comments on this?
I had a comment. And this is for everyone, that when we talk about even about the cleaning of data, now what the bias in a country is, it's going to be very political in nature, since our laws and how do we look at any expression will be differ. Like what will be legal in India might not be legal somewhere else, and what's legal somewhere else might not be legal in India. And that's a bias that's going to be there in our data. So when we try to make an ethical framework that can be applied by any of the governments, how are we looking at the practical application of it? Because the bias in Sri Lanka, Philippines, and India are going to look very different, and our data is already going to reflect it. And without changing the bias that exists in the data, we won't be able to really remove the bias. And to remove that, how far would you go back in the history and clean the data? Since AI is based on historical data, then how far, like even if it's a private organization that we hire, how far are we looking back in the history? Are we going back to the day of the independence or even before that? How do we think about cleaning of data when it comes to feeding it to AI?
Yeah, just to add to that, no, I think that comes, again, you mentioned, no, the misuse of data also, no. Something that, in the legal circles that we are now hearing also is that we have to identify also where is the damage allocated, no? Who do we penalize if, for example, there is a misuse of data, no? That's I think that's where the importance of a specific AI law should come in, no? Because we're going to throw around the liability, no? If it's AI attached to a consumer product, what happens now? Do we kick in the Consumer Act of the country, no? If it actually goes, for example, to media, do we go to another law that will actually be used for us to be able to penalize who is again liable for the misuse, for the release no? So again, no, I think it's also very important for us to look into what you call the allocation of data, no? Again, AI decision making is pretty, it's a process, no? It's not like only one aspect of AI that we can actually uh, blame, no, for an action, no, or for a misuse, or for an inaction, no. It is a process. So practically, where do we, again, as Megha mentioned, no, where, if we backtrack, who's going to be liable in that particular chain, no, of events, no? So again, this has to be, again, clearly, broken down. And I don't think even governments at present, no, are also ready on how to be able to slice it further, no. That's why they need us, They need you guys to be able to, tell government, again, because of the bias, na, hey, you have to stop here, and we have to come in and be able to. We should play our role, no. Again, it's a nationwide, or effort, no, for us to be able to come up with appropriate laws on a per nation, per culture, per country basis, no. That's it. Thank you.
We've kept the last question to be fairly simple. And so what we really want to discuss is that, as we see, like in the last question example, also Varun shared about how our faces are being recorded as an entry pass to getting like a access to a quicker security check-in at the airports or at the immigration, which is already done in Singapore, and also like using of QR code to access any government systems, as Eris was sharing in the PPE model. With inclusion of AI, in what forms do we think that a surveillance is going to be expanded or it's going to be reshaped? Surveillance over our bodies, surveillance over our mobility, surveillance over what we eat, to what we wear, to what we are listening, seeing, experiencing. How do we think that's going to increase further?
It's a question I'd like to ask the panel. Coming from your point of view, as is it right for me to say that you guys are all from India?
Yes.
Okay. From an Indian point of view, what is your take? No, how is this? Are you going to allow the Indian government to survey you? No, and up to what level? No, I understand that, like for example, the passport. No,
Yes.
our passports are our passports capacity is dictated by how well our governments, take care of their people, on how well they vet people coming in and going out, so I want to ask our Indian brothers and sisters, what's your take on this? What kind of are you willing to give up to the Indian government as far as surveillance is concerned? Maybe using AI in the process.
That's a great question, and that's what we have also been struggling about. That when we really that's where the collective came together. We do not know, right? That's a question about that digital technologies are already such a big part of our lives at the moment. And with AI inclusion, how are we looking at it? And what is the just not from a surveillance point or a bias point that it's going to impact, but from a planetary point also. The number of data centers that are going to be built and its impact on the already degrading environment in India. We have been seeing like a lot of hot flashes like droughts, along with too much of flooding at the spaces where it should not be. So it has to be looked in an overall context. We cannot like only look at the AI in terms from just the data lens. That's how we've also been thinking about it. And just coming like on the surveillance part, as you would see, over the past 20-25 odd years, we have seen an increase in inclusion of CCTV cameras as important part of how the urban city planning is done. it's always given as a way, a method to ensure that the city is safe. But none of these things actually make the city safe. So the kind of promises that AI gives that it will make the city safe, or in the climate change that it will provide us enough information to bring in information about the droughts. Is it really helpful? And are we investing incorrectly here? That's also like some of the questions that we really hope that through, like, while we are looking at policies together and with like fellows like you and everyone across globe, we're able to come to a point that where we're saying that here we should use it and here we should really not. So those are like the spaces, because just using AI like and just, using AI as a blanket resource is not going to help all of us, because we cannot have like a tunnel vision that only lasts us like till 2030, because technology changes. Tomorrow there can be a new shiny toy that we all will be more interested in. So, Suruchi, Varun, would you like to add?
Yeah, you want to go ahead, Varun? Oh, yeah. So, like Megha said, the reason we all came together, we are from different organizations, coming from different standpoint view and different interest. But our larger concern was about how in a country like India, where lot of the welfare services and lot of the sector like education, health, and most of the people are dependent on the state. So when you bring in private players, and in technology with AI there's lot of private investment and private players coming in, then what happens to the whole nature of public good? Even for that matter, education as a public good, with coming of AI, the nature is going to change, because there's going to be a lot of private investment and private players coming, and if they're investing, then definitely they are going to dictate the terms and conditions. So our fundamental question is there for a state, for a country like India and different South Asian countries, where you have to protect the rights of the citizens, where you have to protect their basic rights, education, health, housing. How, what forms of, where you say regulation becomes very important. We really believe that regulation, and coming from a very political economic perspective, in India we have been seeing over the past 20 years the state has been becoming a facilitator rather than a regulator, coming, like supporting all kind of neoliberal policies and all of those things. Then we as a collective, we believe that the state has to be taking, of course the private players will come, outsourcing will be there to them, but the control and what the protecting the rights of the citizens should be the priority. And this becomes more complex here because investment comes mostly from the private players. So this is where we started our research to understand, when there's not going to be a private investment, what will happen to public accountability. Therefore we gave the examples of data ownership and governance, misuse, and things like surveillance. And the point of like budget is also very important. If the state is not willing to invest, then the whole idea of it, of a public good, may collapse. So what personally coming from, I would suggest that the state should be investing more, because then only you'll be able to protect the rights of the citizens. And if you're doing PPP model, then what, then regulations made to be very, like that way. It needs to be the rules and needs to be clearly identified, where Aris and Megha were talking about different stages here becomes very important, right? When you're doing when you're, the first is like the budget allocations, then the tools development, then there would be like user perspective, then there will be R&D. So different, there are different components at different sectors. For example, defense sector, like defense, which are very critical for any state. So how much private, players, private investment you're going to take in AI for defense, right? So it varies from sector to sector, and it also varies from different stages also. Like Megha talked about data centers being opening. So that is where, do you think it's a private investment which will play more important, because then the control of the overall common resources of that area is going to be taken care of. For example, if data centers are just not going to be relying on technology, they're also going to take huge land, huge resources, water resources in that, well, while you're going to develop. So what will be the nature of the common resources, everything in India, particularly what we see as a researcher, the meaning of common resources, the meaning of public good, public delivery, everything is undergoing changes because of heavy influx of technology. And right now we're talking about AI, because AI is something which will make it more automation kind of thing, compared to where we had like more with technology, at least there was some scope for human intervention. So this is what Aris, you have been talking about, is completely, the questions are very relevant. Therefore we planned through this workshop, we thought that we'll get more perspective from different countries, so that it becomes important for us to draw comparative lines to understand the publicness, because our whole objective is to understand that the citizens welfare is something which should not be harmed, and is like something which we wanted to talk about. I think, Varun, do you want to take it up?
Thanks, Suruchi. I think that covered the whole lens of where we started and how we are where we are today. So thanks a lot for that. I don't have much to add. Just thanks everyone for uh, letting us have this discussion, and also like uh, coming and making this very engaging. Thank you, Aris. Thank you, all the others who engaged with us. So any last word, thoughts, Megha, before we close this?
Nine, we'll be sharing, like, no, the odds, but we'll be sharing our work on LinkedIn, and we can also, so it will be great to be connected and to work together, because again, the question that we all are thinking is something we cannot find solutions for it in silos. We all together would have to come and work. This is too big for anything to be worked in silos. So we would really love that if you can be connected with us, and because we'll be conducting similar workshops across the year, this year and the next year, and taking as many questions and understanding as possible and adding to our work. So it will be great that we can all just stay connected and learn from each other and build solidarities across borders. And we would really love the feedback about the session, how we can make it more interactive and engaging, and what are the other things that you would have seen, that you would have expected to see in the session. Would be really great that if you can share your feedback with us. We'll be sharing the presentation, is already shared with the APrIGF team. They can share it further with you. Our email IDs are also added to it. Have a great day and good luck for the next session. It was really lovely connecting with everybody and discussing and having this discussion.
Thank you, Megha.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Alice, so much for all the operation.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
you.
APrIGF, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.